Love is an eternal, inseparable bond between two people that can transcend even the constructs of time and fate. At least, that's what Lunar Silver Star Story Complete would have you believe. Love comes in all forms: passionate, unrequited, unusual, and, yes, even debaucherous. If you choose to subdue your masculinity and look deep within yourself, you might even find that you enjoy it, foster it, and perhaps want it. As most RPGs tend not to have such a heavy focus on love, this may instantly turn you off. But do you really want to be that close-minded person that misses out on great things just because you don't want to try something that's a little bit different? I may be exaggerating, but Lunar Silver Star Story Complete is one of those experiences that I think you should have for yourself, and I'm going to tell you why. In the PlayStation Prime of JRPGs, there were unfortunately many that didn't make it to PAL territories despite being released in America. Slowly, over the years, I've been managing to play the titles that I wasn't able to when I was a teenager. Lunar Silver Star Story Complete, or simply Lunar as I will refer to it in the future, is one such game that never made it to my home in Australia. I had often heard great things about the game online, and even chanced upon some MIDIs of tracks from the OST, so I was always jealous that I never got to experience the game for myself. The first game in the Lunar series, Lunar Silver Star Story Complete, is one of many remakes of a game that originally released in 1992 as simply Lunar the Silver Star for the Sega CD. It was later remade for the Sega Saturn, and then ported to the Sony PlayStation as the game I am reviewing today. It also received port remakes to the Game Boy Advance and the Sony PlayStation Portable. If anything, this game has really gotten around, which by the way Working Designs localized this version, it doesn't surprise me in the least that the game wants to get into any dirty slot it can fill with its data. Lunar was released for the Sony PlayStation between 1998 and 1999 in Japan and other NTSC territories. Whilst the game was developed originally by GameArts, which may attribute its similarities to Grandia, the Western release was localized by Working Designs, who injected a whole different flavor via the creative liberty of the CEO, Victor Island, and his crew, and we'll touch more upon that later. In Lunar, you play as Alex, a nobody from a remote village who dreams of becoming a Dragon Master, a legendary hero capable of communicating with dragons, beings that are worshipped for their divine power. Together with his friends Lunar and Ramus, he lives a quiet life using his musical aptitude to entertain the local villagers at festivals. One day, when he's visiting the monument of the deceased Dragon Master, an earthquake rocks the surrounding area. After the tremors subside, we are introduced to a winded Ramus, who has near given himself a stitch in his excitement to climb the hill to tell Alex his news. He says that the warmer weather has melted ice around the nearby Dragon's Cave, so they should waste no time in undertaking an adventure that will make them both rich and popular. Before they leave, they decide to also tell Lunar, who joins them. Whilst Alex is keen on having an adventure, Ramus just wants to strike it rich, and Lunar just wants to be with Alex. Even from the beginning of the game, you can tell that the main drive of the narrative is the relationship between Alex and Lunar. John Paul Young said it first, "Love is in the air." Yes, as I mentioned before, this is a love story, so if this notion makes you want to vomit a little in the back of your throat, do so, swallow it, get that extra protein, and get over it. Whilst the game starts on a small scale, having you explore a cave to find treasure, the stakes get a lot higher as surprises come from places that you may not have anticipated. When someone takes Lunar away from Alex further into the adventure, Alex's journey becomes a mission to get her back, no matter the cost. I enjoyed the different angle the game took for the protagonist's motive, in that he wasn't just trying to save the world as was typical in games at the time, but trying to save the woman he loves. Most games around the time of Lunar's release tended to focus more on the overall adventure and a world crisis, rather than the romantic relationships between your characters, so this was a refreshing experience. The romance also extends to other characters within your party, which drive the entire narrative forward. In addition to Alex and Lunar, there is also Nash and Mia, and Kyle and Jessica, who struggle with their own feelings for each other during their time together. As Pat Benatar once famously sung, love is a battlefield, and the characters argue with each other and deliberate with themselves about their feelings many times as the story progresses. Some of the characters are extremely abrasive or unlikable to begin with. Take Nash for example. He is a member of a prodigious magic academy who was hand-selected to assist the men in charge. His nose is often upturned, and he speaks down to Alex and anyone who doesn't live in the magic city of Vane, often inflating his own self-worth. But if you take the time to explore the Magic Academy thoroughly, you'll learn that Nash isn't a particularly bright or studious student, which makes you wonder why he was selected for his position in the first place. Then there's Jessica, who shows a calm, demure attitude around her father, but exhibits a sailor's mouth and a tardiness to her studies as a priestess when not in his shadow. Each character has their own unique personality that shifts and grows as they journey together. Even though I may not have been a fan of how the localization was handled in some places, you can tell that at least GameArts cared a lot for the characters that they had created. From a narrative perspective, this game is quite unique in that townsfolk will change what they say depending on what you have done. The world building is so incredibly well done in this regard, so I often found myself talking to every NPC in town after I completed an objective just to see what new information they would have to tell me. I did find that eventually I had to stop doing this, as many of the NPCs had immersion-breaking dialogue or were outright vulgar to the point of objectifying women, or constantly talking about the need to be inebriated. I understand that this is not in the original Japanese game, and was only injected as a perceived way to make the game more appetizing to a Western audience when Working Designs did the localization. While some of the dialogue may have worked in the 90s, I felt that this was a bit antiquated when compared to dialogues that you'd find in games these days. I mean, we really didn't need an entire city change from being normal everyday people to a bunch of inbred hicks with a southern accent, did we? The game plays like a typical RPG. You explore towns, fields, and dungeons whilst battling enemies. Unlike other games of its time, Lunar displays monsters on the field map rather than relying on random encounters. Sometimes these enemies can factor into puzzle solving within a dungeon, and I enjoyed this a lot. For example, in the early White Dragon Cave, you can have some enemies charge into ice pillars to break them and reveal new paths or treasure. If an enemy sees you, they will charge toward you. Some enemies are slow and can easily be avoided, but in the case of flying enemies, if they see you, then you better bet you're going to be battling them. I did find it strange that enemies that were so much lower in level than your party would still aggro when you walked near them, facilitating an unnecessary battle that was just a waste of time. I can think of a few other games that manage this better, like Guardian's Crusade for example. Basically, when an enemy touches Alex, you're going to be in for a battle. The battles themselves are conducted on a separate screen where your characters are lined up on the right with the enemies on the left. A detailed static backdrop themed around the area that the party is in stages the battle. These battles are tactical in nature, with positioning playing a pivotal role in the success of landing physical attacks. If a character's range stat is not high enough, they may not even be able to reach an enemy in order to attack them on their turn. Using ranged weapons or magic negates the necessity to move, but you need to be careful that the enemies also cannot move beyond your front lines and pick off your weaker characters, because you can choose where to put them in a tactical menu. Being a GameArts title, you can really see the foundations being laid for what would later become Grandia's battle system. Each character can choose to attack, use magic, use an item, or defend when it is their turn, and all commands will be executed within the same round, with speed determining the turn order. It was sometimes annoying that Mia was often the slowest character, so would cast her magic last, especially after the enemies had already attacked. But I guess it makes sense considering that she spent most of her time cooped up in the Magic Academy without any real field experience. If you don't like grinding, then I'm sorry to say that this game does involve a lot. In order to increase the artificial length of the game, Working Designs increased the difficulty by making enemies do 45% more damage, give 14% less experience, and 10% less silver when defeated. If you don't spend time eking out character levels and slowly progressing through a dungeon, you're going to meet the game over screen pretty quickly. Heck, the first boss in the game has an ability that auto-heals itself every round, and if your damage output isn't higher than the amount it heals for, you simply cannot win. When a character gains enough experience, they will level up, which can sometimes grant them a new skill, more range, or an additional attack, as well as boost their base stats. A unique thing I liked about this game is that some characters can attack more than once in a single turn, based on a stat that determines their number of attacks, which came in really handy, especially in later areas. Each character is also relegated to a class, so there's not really any customization that can be done, other than choosing what equipment and accessories you give them. Typically, you're going to want to equip the most powerful weapons and armor if you want to even have a chance at surviving. Characters can only hold 6 items each, though the flying Gnarl can hold a much larger number of items. A character can only use an item in battle if they are holding it. It reminded me a little of how Suikoden used this system, and brought back a lot of frustration I had with that game's inventory management. If you need to swap items between characters with a full inventory, you first need to give an item to Null, then have Null hand over the new item, have the character equip it, give the old equipment back to Null, and then have Null give back the item you originally got rid of to make room for the new equipment. It's incredibly tedious and antiquated, and I hope that the later ports of this game fixed the issue. Lunar doesn't really offer much in terms of minigames or side quests, which I did find a little disappointing. The only additional thing you can do is collect bromides, which are basically racy images of the women characters in the game. Additionally, you can also gather soap and use it in special locations that grant unique cutscenes, showing your party members half naked. I mean, if you want to see Kyle's butt crack, be my guest. This doesn't really add anything to the game, and I felt that it was more difficult for me to take the game seriously in the more grave moments. The graphics of the game are simple and hold up to the test of time. They look just as they did back in the 90s, but I wouldn't say that they are particularly anything to write home about, considering that there were other games on the Sony PlayStation at the time, and before it, that did a much better job with sprite work. However, I did like the little details such as rustling leaves on a tree that made the world seem a little more lively. The battle backdrops were lovingly crafted, and I enjoyed seeing a more distinct representation of the areas I was traversing. Animated cutscenes took the role of depicting the more emotional scenes, and I felt that this worked very well. I appreciated that they were used frequently to highlight events and important character interactions. I especially liked the cutscene of Lunar on a boat, which was almost cut on the production floor. Imagine that. I feel it really showed Lunar's uncertainty in her role in the adventure, and her heritage. Music plays a major role within the game, as it's often used as a means to progress the story and as a motif. For example, at one point the antagonists kidnap all singers in the world, which includes Lunar, to further their agenda. One village has you entering a cave because the wind blowing through it has changed the town's melody, subjecting you to an awful earbleed. Speaking of, all party members have a turn at singing to each other to raise a submerged shrine from a lake bed. Here, take a listen. I got chills, they're multiplying, and I'm losing control, 'cause the power you're supplying, it's electrifying.
You better shape up, 'cause I need a man, and my heart is set on you. You better shape up, you better understand. To my heart it must be true.
Nothing left for me to do.
You're the one that I want,
honey, the one that I want. Honey, the one that I want.
ooh, 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 the one I need. Oh yes indeed. I never knew, but when I'm way up here, it's crystal clear, and now I'm in a whole new world with you.
Now I'm in a whole new world with you.
Unbelievable sights, indescribable feeling, soaring, tumbling, freewheeling through an endless diamond sky. A whole new world.
Don't you dare close your eyes.
100,000
Hold your breath, it gets better.
I'm like a shooting star. I've come so far. I can't go back to where I used to be.
But seriously, I enjoyed that music was another theme that played into the story. There were many tracks that used leitmotif to convey Lunar's theme and her importance to the story, which I appreciated a lot. The track that appealed to me the most would have to be Thieves' Bazaar, which plays in a city of cutthroat mongrels. It's kind of upbeat and catchy and makes you want to join the guild and go on a dastardly adventure to snag the next biggest treasure. Lunar also has some voice acting to supplement the dialogue at times, which also appears within cutscenes and battles. I didn't feel that it was amazing, but it wasn't bad either. Again, 90s game. I'm looking at you, Resident Evil. Lunar Silver Star Story Complete brings a fresh take to the RPG genre by making love its primary theme in a game that would have been average otherwise. Whilst the cast of characters are interesting, I felt that the way the game was localized as a whole often made it difficult to relate to the characters or situations, as I was often being drawn out of the narrative by overtly sexual or discriminating NPC dialogue. Whilst it may have been enjoyable in the 90s, I feel like these days it would be more subject to a critical lens, and such jokes should be left in the past. If you're interested in seeing this adventure through, I would recommend not interacting with all the town NPCs, as it may make your journey that much more bearable. If it wasn't for the localization though, I would definitely recommend this game. Maybe the localization was done this way to make love more digestible to a Western audience who lacks the same Eastern sensibilities. I can only guess to why Working Designs would have done that. By the way, are there any games that you have played where you felt the localization was off, or that you know that the game was localized in a way that's not faithful to the original? Let me know in the comments. This has been Venoir reviewing Lunar Silver Star Story for the Sony PlayStation. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to hit the like button and subscribe, as it helps me out a lot. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you all next time. Take care, and bye bye for now.